remember Michael Jackson? For decades, the whole world knew him as a king of pop, the child prodigy who moonwalked on every major stage, broke every musical record, and became one of the most beloved icons to ever hold a microphone. That smile, that voice, that magic, it all looked so effortless, almost surreal, as if fame was something he was born to possess. But behind that dazzling light was a much deeper darkness. A childhood full of fear, a life hunted by endless sleepless nights, surgeries, medication, lawsuits, and a loneliness so heavy it nearly drowned him long before the end arrived. The kingdom the public saw was always glowing, while his private life shattered behind locked doors. And even more shocking, the truth about his final days, the drugs, the pressure, the desperate battle to sleep for just one night, revealing a man who had drifted far from what the world had imagined. How did a global icon, worshipped by millions, fall into such a lonely and tragic final chapter? Rare photos and untold truths will appear in this video. Watch until the end to understand why Michael Jackson remains one of the figures the world both admires and deeply mourns. Michael Joseph Jackson was born on August 29, 1958, in Gary, Indiana, a steel town sinking into unemployment, poverty, and crime. The small house at 2300 Jackson Street was essentially just a cramped box for a family of 11. In winter, the cold seeped through every thin crack in the walls. In summer, the heat seemed to swallow the room whole. That was the world Michael was born into, where music was a rare tenderness. His father, Joseph Jackson, worked tirelessly at the steel mill, his hands calloused from metal and exhaustion. But what the children feared most wasn't the sound of the key unlocking the door, but the silence behind it. A silence heavy with rules, cold commands, and punishments that came without warning. According to Michael, miss a beat, get the belt. Miss a step, get slapped. And defiance was forbidden. Michael was only 5 years old when Joseph decided his sons had to become stars. Playtime vanished. Laughter became noise. Childhood was replaced by rehearsals, singing and dancing for hours every night, sometimes until midnight. Neighbors recounted hearing the boys practicing harmonies until the whole neighborhood was asleep. To the world later on, it would be natural talent. But for Michael, it was a way to survive. Rare photos show a tiny boy with big, round eyes standing in front of a microphone taller than himself. A radiant smile, but stiff shoulders, as if he already understood the burden placed upon them. Behind that adorable look was a child who learned too early that love was conditional and it vanished if he wasn't perfect. Michael described his father's discipline as a mix of fear and longing. Fear the man who always demanded perfection, and longing for the warmth he rarely gave. In an interview, he spoke of times hiding in the closet, crying softly so no one would hear. "I just wanted to play," Michael said. "I just wanted to be a child." When the Jackson 5 formed, Michael became the center, not by choice, but because of talent, the gift Joseph used as a weapon. While his brothers practiced their parts, Joseph forced Michael to practice more strictly, to the point of exhaustion. Nights where the living room turned into a drill ground. Furniture pushed to the sides, Joseph standing with a belt in hand, tapping it against his leg as a warning. By age 8, Michael had a voice that could move an entire room, rich with emotion, unbelievably mature for a child. But behind that voice was pain. Behind the applause that was coming was a childhood retreating into a dark corner. Later, Michael confessed that the stage was the only place he felt safe. Under the bright lights, he was no longer a frightened boy in Gary, but someone else, someone loved by the whole world. But that escape came at a price. The line between who you are and who you must be was permanently blurred. That environment, violence, pressure, fear, left a permanent mark on who Michael was. It created a man always seeking validation, always feeling he was never enough, and seeking love from millions, because he rarely got it from the very father he yearned for most. And when the Jackson 5 prepared to leave Gary for Motown, Michael carried with him a truth that would haunt his entire life. He was never allowed to be a child, and for the rest of his life, he would only try to reclaim the childhood he lost. When Michael was just 6 years old, Joseph Jackson began pushing his children into a world larger and harsher than any child could imagine. Rehearsals in the cramped living room quickly turned into a rigorous training schedule. The boys practiced harmonies until their voices were hoarse. They repeated dance steps until the wooden floor beneath their feet wore down from friction. And at the center of it all was Michael, smaller, softer, but clearly the fire that Joseph believed would lead the family out of poverty. In 1964, the Jackson brothers became the Jackson 5, a complete group ready to compete in talent shows in Gary and Chicago. Rare surviving footage shows Michael, just slightly taller than a microphone, unleashing charisma far beyond his years. His voice was powerful, his rhythm impeccable, his stage instincts nearly perfect. But behind that confidence was a child molded by pressure, programmed not to be allowed to make mistakes. The turning point came quickly. In 1967, the Jackson 5 signed with Steeltown Records and released their first single, Big Boy. The song didn't become a national hit, but it was enough to get people noticing. And when a Motown executive saw them perform at the Apollo Theater, everything changed. Berry Gordy, the founder of Motown, immediately realized what Joseph had known for a long time. Michael was something special. In July 1968, the Jackson 5 officially signed with Motown. The family left Gary, leaving behind the rusting steel mills for a hopeful Detroit. But success brought a new form of control. Motown assigned vocal coaches, choreographers, and an extremely tight image management system. For Michael, the rules only got stricter. His schedule became a continuous loop of rehearsing, recording, schooling, photo shoots, and attending events, repeating endlessly. When I Want You Back was released in October 1969, the world finally saw what those close to him already knew. Michael wasn't just talented. He was a phenomenon. The song went straight to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, the first in a string of 4 consecutive chart-topping hits. And at age 11, Michael became the lead singer of one of the hottest new groups in America. But fame brought a psychological split that would haunt Michael for life. On stage, he exploded, spinning, dancing, singing with a power no one believed a child could possess. But off stage, the pressure mounted. In interviews, he was a soft-spoken boy, rarely smiling, his eyes always seeming to ponder something. People who met him recounted that Michael often stood watching other children play during breaks, as if he had forgotten how to blend into a world he once belonged to. Backstage, Joseph tightened the discipline, reminding his sons, especially Michael, that success was fragile, easily lost, and had to be paid for every day. Perfection was no longer a goal, but a condition for survival. This was the beginning of the 2 lives Michael would live: an idol loved by millions and a prisoner of expectation. As the Jackson 5 prepared to enter their next albums, Michael's future began to branch off. Producers spoke of a solo career. The press called him a child genius. And Motown saw something even bigger, a global icon they could mold. Michael was rising too fast, and like a star pulled out of orbit before it could mature, the gravity of fame had begun to bend his life in ways even he could not understand. By the late 1970s, Michael Jackson had achieved what most artists only dare to dream of. But deep down, he felt the world had only seen a tiny fraction of him. After years of being tightly controlled by Motown, he yearned for freedom, creative, emotional, and for his true self. That desire took shape in 1979 with the album Off the Wall, his first mature solo product produced by Quincy Jones. With tracks like Don't Stop Till You Get Enough and Rock With You, Michael officially transformed from a child star into a true artist. His vocals were mature, his dance style sharp, and his artistic ego finally had room to breathe. But Off the Wall was just the beginning. In November 1982, Michael released Thriller, the album that not only shattered every expectation, but rewrote the entire history of pop music. 7 out of 9 tracks hit the top 10. The Thriller MV turned music videos into mini movies. Billie Jean, with the illuminated floor, became a global symbol. And when Michael performed the moonwalk for the first time during the Motown 25 special in May 1983, the world seemed to hold its breath. It was a moment that changed pop culture forever. At age 25, he became the biggest superstar on the planet. The numbers were hard to believe. Thriller sold over 70 million copies. He won 8 Grammys in one night, topped the charts in over 20 countries. Wherever he went, streets closed. Bodyguards followed his every step. And slowly, the brightest star in the world began to fade from the inside out. The 1980s, seemingly full of glamour, held a vulnerability. In 1984, during the filming of a Pepsi commercial, a pyrotechnic effect malfunctioned, setting Michael's hair on fire. Severe burns to his scalp led to a series of surgeries, and the beginning of a long, painful relationship with prescription painkillers. On stage, he still smiled. Away from the lights, he hid his wounds under wigs and makeup. Then came Neverland, a shelter, a dream, a private world he built to hold on to his stolen childhood. Purchased in 1988, the vast ranch had roller coasters, a zoo, a movie theater, and quiet corners where he believed he could be a child again. But the more he tried to build a world without fear, the more the real world intruded. Paparazzi flew helicopters overhead. The press speculated on every action. Rumors arose, eccentric, weird surgeries, and accusations began to sprout. Even so, on stage, Michael remained invincible. The Bad, 1987 to 1989, Dangerous, 1992 to 1993, and History, 1996 to 1997, tours broke records across continents. Stadiums of 120,000 people were packed. Security forces had to be deployed to control crowds. In Bucharest, nearly 70,000 spectators screamed hysterically just because he walked onto the stage. To them, he wasn't just a singer, he was a living legend. But every night after leaving the stage, silence swallowed him again. Alone in a hotel room, alone in a dressing room, alone behind the curtain of fame that grew heavier by the day. To the world, he was perfection. But to himself, that perfection was a prison. And behind the dazzling lights of the global throne, small cracks were spreading, signaling that the darkest chapters of his life were approaching. For most people, the 1990s opened with hope. But for Michael Jackson, the decade that began with the supreme glory gradually slid into darkness, a place where no stage light was bright enough to illuminate. What the world saw was eccentricity. But what Michael lived through was fear. Fear of exposure, fear of pain, fear of losing the only image that had protected him his whole life. In the early 1990s, Michael's relationship with his own body became fragile and complex. As vitiligo spread, his skin became blotchy with distinct white patches. Makeup artists had to work to exhaustion before every appearance to cover the unevenness. Under interview and stage lights, the audience only saw a face as smooth and white as a mask. But backstage, the truth lay in the uneven, pale patches on his arms, chest, and face, painful reminders of a body he no longer recognized. But vitiligo wasn't the only reason. Teenage acne left scars. A nose injury in 1979 forced reconstructive surgery. Then more surgeries when breathing became affected. Each surgery carved another layer of trauma onto him, both physically and psychologically. By the late 1980s, plastic surgeons, dermatologists, stylists revolved his life like planets moving around a center that was losing control. But no physical pain matched the internal chaos that erupted after the 1984 Pepsi accident. The fire set his hair ablaze and burned his scalp so severely that bone was exposed, forcing multiple surgeries. And along with surgery came strong painkillers. Pills initially meant just to numb the pain gradually became something he depended on, a silent, hidden dependency that eventually opened the door to more dangerous addictions. In the public eye, no one saw that. People only saw Neverland, vibrant, full of magic, like a fairy tale kingdom. There were carousels, a zoo, a cinema, perfect gardens. To fans, it was paradise. To Michael, it was a sanctuary, a rare place where he could reimagine his stolen childhood. But Neverland also had a dark side. The more he turned it into a place to escape the world, the more Michael was criticized for escaping reality. When media curiosity turned morbid, the ranch gradually turned from a safe space into a violated crime scene. Paparazzi flew helicopters overhead. Reporters sneaked through fences. Tabloids fabricated countless stories. Rumors that had long been whispers had now become a roar. In 1993, that wave exploded into a global media detonation. That year, allegations involving 13-year-old Jordan Chandler emerged. The whole world caught fire. News 24/7. Paparazzi camped outside Neverland. Newspapers ran the cruelest headlines. Michael maintained his innocence, but his image was damaged beyond repair. Behind closed doors, stress strangled him. Friends recounted that he shook, suffered constant insomnia, and feared stepping outside. He lost weight rapidly. Drug dependency worsened. To end the storm, he agreed to a civil settlement, something he insisted was only to protect his sanity, not an admission of guilt. But once the seed of doubt was planted in the public mind, it would take root forever. The world had witnessed Michael's physical changes. Now they witnessed his emotional disintegration. After the Chandler case, Michael tried to stand up. He married Lisa Marie Presley in 1994, a marriage that surprised many, but according to friends, was built on genuine empathy. However, the pressure of fame, drugs, and media fractured the relationship after just 2 years. In 1996, he married Debbie Rowe, a nurse who had known him for years. This marriage brought 2 children, Prince and Paris, whom Michael loved deeply, as if to compensate for the childhood he never had. For a brief moment, it was like a new beginning, but the darkness never left him. In the late 1990s, news of Michael's exhaustion spread. In the history tour videos, one saw Michael, who was explosive at times and listless and tired at others. Backstage, he was often lethargic, tearful, or in visible pain. His team protected him fiercely, minimizing outside contact. But those close to him understood clearly. Michael was fighting wounds that no applause could heal. The next turning point occurred in 2003, when Martin Bashir released the documentary, Living with Michael Jackson. The work was promised to be a fair perspective, but when aired, it became a sharp knife. Manipulative editing made Michael appear strange, unstable, and irresponsible. The public reacted instantly. The media mocked. The internet, now exploding, amplified every rumor. Then in 2004, the unthinkable happened. Michael was arrested. For the second time, he was accused of serious charges. The image of the king of pop in handcuffs, walking into court surrounded by police, became one of the most shocking moments in pop culture. Throughout nearly 5 months of the 2005 trial, Michael appeared frail. Trembling hands, sunken cheeks, voice so quiet it was hard to hear. Some days he needed medical attention before proceedings. Some days he arrived late because he couldn't stand. But on June 13, 2005, the verdict rang out, not guilty, on all counts. That should have been a liberation. But for Michael, everything was too late. His health collapsed. His finances collapsed. Neverland, once paradise, was now a nightmare he could not return to. He left, living nomadically between Bahrain, Ireland, then Las Vegas, a man with no gravity holding him, drifting among the shards of his life. And the darkness had not yet ended. Leaving Neverland wasn't just leaving a house. It was a moment marking a deep rupture. When the sanctuary Michael built to recreate his childhood became a mirror reflecting all his fears, judgment, humiliation, and the prying eyes of the world that never closed. After the 2005 trial, Michael changed to the point where relatives didn't recognize him. He lost significant weight. His shoulders slumped. Even his voice, once warm and musical, became trembling, weak syllables. Friends said Michael lived in a state of high alert. He avoided crowds, avoided strangers, avoided anything that might recall the trauma of the investigation. He moved like a shadow, quiet, tired, no longer like the man who once stood before hundreds of thousands of spectators. Michael spent months in Bahrain, living in the home of Sheikh Abdullah bin Hamad Al Khalifa. Initially, it seemed like a shelter, a quiet land, limited access, no Western press stalking. He wrote music, wrote poetry, recorded demos, trying to heal a worn-down spirit. But soon legal and financial troubles appeared, including contract disputes that caused a friendship to break and led to lawsuits. It was an unchanging rule. Wherever Michael went, trouble followed. In Ireland, he rented a quiet estate and worked in a small studio, where producers described him as fragile but full of magic. They recounted times Michael stood alone in the studio, letting the golden light hit his face, dancing rhythmically and singing melodies so beautiful they made everyone hold their breath. But just minutes later, He would collapse into a chair, completely exhausted, as if the genius inside him was consuming his body too fast.
One more time.
By the late 2000s, Michael lived mostly in Las Vegas and Los Angeles, trying to find peace with his 3 children. But that peace never lasted long. Debts piled up, a series of lawsuits, unpaid loans. The cost of maintaining Neverland was like a wound that never closed. The man who once earned hundreds of millions of dollars now had to sell assets, negotiate debt restructuring, and depend on advisors, many of whom did not have his best interests at heart. Tours had exhausted his body. Scandals exhausted his mind. And the financial crisis made everything else collapse. Then an opportunity appeared, an opportunity carrying both hope and tragedy. This is it. In 2008, Michael signed with AEG Live for a series of comeback concerts at the O2 Arena in London, initially planned for just 10 shows. But when tickets sold out in hours, the number was raised to 50 shows, an unimaginable workload for any artist, especially one with health as fragile as Michael. But he agreed. Fame, pride, financial burden, and the desire to be recognized once more all blended into that decision. Rehearsals began in early 2009. And backstage, the darkness slowly revealed itself. Dancers, musicians, and backstage staff recounted that Michael was like 2 different people. There were days he shone, dancing as if gravity didn't exist, tweaking every harmony, leading the band, and making the whole rehearsal room explode with energy. But there were also days he trembled, gasped for breath, was confused. He missed rehearsals, arrived late, sometimes stood motionless, lost in his own thoughts. Those close to him knew the truth. Michael was dependent on medication at an alarming level. To sleep, he used all kinds of strong sedatives, Valium, Ativan, Xanax, already dangerous when mixed, but they no longer worked. His body had tolerated the drugs long ago. And then, in the months before This Is It, a stronger substance entered his life, propofol, an extremely potent anesthetic used in surgery, requiring monitoring equipment and a specialized anesthesiologist. Never allowed to be used for sleep. Never allowed to be used in a bedroom. But Michael had used it for years. Insiders said Michael called propofol the only way to turn off my thoughts. Chronic insomnia, an obsession with perfection, and a lifetime of being hunted had left his mind in a state where it couldn't switch off. Body exhausted, mind exhausted, but sleep still evaded him. Dr. Conrad Murray, hired as a personal physician for the tour, became the person responsible for monitoring Michael's health in the final months. Records and testimony later revealed a terrifying truth. Using drugs nightly, increasing doses over time, and depending almost entirely on propofol, a drug never permitted for use in this context. Meanwhile, AEG applied greater pressure, needed Michael to practice harder, ensure fitness, ensure the show would happen on schedule. Michael was trapped between contractual obligations, financial pressure, the judgment of the world, and the fear of disappointing fans after a decade of silence. He was 50, emaciated, chronic anxiety, chronic pain, severe insomnia, dependent on anesthetics. But every time he stepped onto the rehearsal floor, magic still happened. In the This Is It footage, one sees him controlling the band like a gifted conductor, correcting every drum beat, singing every sample melody, devising lighting and inspiring like the golden era. However, those brief moments were overshadowed by the darkness that crept in when the music stopped. By June 2009, that darkness had turned into a real crisis. Staff recounted that Michael was visibly weaker. He shivered in the heat. He complained of cold, thirst, dizziness, slow reactions. Some warned he needed to rest immediately. Others begged him to stop. But the machine was running. Too big, too expensive, too late to stop. And in the final days, when the pressure reached its peak, when his body sent desperate signals, Michael entered the darkest chapter of his life. A chapter the world only saw when it was too late. By June 2009, Michael Jackson was living in a body that no longer had the strength to meet the expectations the whole world placed on him. Rehearsals for this, as it got heavier, the pressure grew larger. Every hour, every dance step, every line sung carried on its shoulders the weight of 50 sold-out shows. 50 promises to fans, to creditors, to organizers, and to himself. And behind it all was a body silently failing. On June 19th, during a rehearsal at the Staples Center, those present said Michael was no longer himself. He trembled constantly, spoke with difficulty. His movements lost connection with the familiar rhythm. Director Kenny Ortega sent an email to AEG leadership, warning that Michael was not in condition to rehearse, physically or mentally. He wrote, "He needs a shrink and a medical check. We cannot let him rehearse tonight." The warning was ignored. The performance machine could not stop. Not for health, not for exhaustion, not for Michael. On June 23rd and 24th, a miracle happened. Michael lit up again. In the last surviving rehearsal footage, he danced "They Don't Care About Us" full of fire, directing the band with agile eyes, singing perfect lines like the old days. In that moment, the greatest artist in the world came alive once more. But behind that light was a human being standing tall thanks to sedatives and a final will. The night of the 24th ended at midnight. Michael returned to the Holmby Hills mansion, luxurious but empty. There, Dr. Conrad Murray was waiting. According to later testimony, Michael was anxious, restless, exhausted, and desperate because he hadn't slept for days. What happened next still haunts the world. Murray gave him a series of sedatives, Valium, lorazepam, midazolam, but they had no effect. Michael begged for milk, his own nickname for propofol. Murray initially refused, but then agreed. Somewhere between 1 o'clock and 2 a.m., the bottle of propofol was attached to the 4-drip next to his bed. Michael fell asleep for the first time in days, and for the last time in his life. Around noon on June 25th, Murray testified that he found Michael not breathing. Instead of calling 911 immediately, mandatory procedure in any emergency, he performed CPR himself, called an assistant, then called others. Nearly 30 precious minutes passed before emergency services were called. When paramedics arrived, Michael Jackson, the most famous artist on planet, lay motionless on the bedroom floor, skin cold, pupils unresponsive, heart showing no electrical signal. They performed CPR continuously on the way to UCLA Hospital, but the result did not change. 2:26 p.m., Michael Joseph Jackson was pronounced dead. Outside the hospital, fans gathered in shock. Television worldwide switched to breaking news. Seasoned reporters suddenly became choked up. People cried on sidewalks, in offices, in their living rooms. Radio simultaneously turned to Billie Jean, Thriller, Man in the Mirror. For millions of people, time stopped. But inside the hospital, the heartbreaking truth was laid bare. His children were taken to a private room to see their father one last time. Staff recounted that Paris, only 11 years old, collapsed sobbing. Prince stood silent, stunned, unable to understand what was happening. Blanket, the youngest, clung tightly to an adult's hand, scared and lost. The autopsy report later revealed the truth. Acute propofol intoxication, used against regulations, without monitoring equipment. The world called it an accident, but many believe it was something else. A preventable tragedy, born of pressure, profit, and a lifetime of pain. And in the silence after that last breath, one thing became clear. The man who gave the world everything died in exhaustion and despair. The world mourned Michael Jackson as if time had just cracked. In the hours after he passed away, streets filled with people holding candles, radios played his songs nonstop, and social media, still in its infancy then, nearly crashed as millions searched for news. TV editors struggled to express the magnitude of the loss. Not just a celebrity gone, but an era, a symbol, a cultural phenomenon. But as the world grieved, another story began. A story of legacy, truth, and the complex humanity of a man millions thought they understood, but actually never fully did. In the early days after his death, Michael's estate went from a state of near bankruptcy to a global empire. His music returned to the charts. Thriller hit the top again. Memorabilia was auctioned at record levels. The documentary, This Is It, edited from the final rehearsal footage, became a global blockbuster, showing Michael, who was both fragile and brilliant, exhausted yet creative down to the last detail. But beyond the commercial revival, something deeper happened. The world looked back at him. Those who once criticized began to soften their tone. Opponents admitted they never understood the weight he had to carry. Fans, journalists, scholars reviewed interviews, his childhood, the investigations, the scandals. And as they pieced the fragments together, the truth appeared clearly. Michael's life wasn't just a story of fame. It was a story of survival and adversity. His 3 children, Prince, Paris, and Blanket, grew up away from the noise of the media, raised by family and trusted guardians. Paris, in particular, later shared much about the love their father had for them. She spoke of a father who read bedtime stories, cooked breakfast, taught them compassion, creativity, and kindness. He was the best dad ever, she said. A simple sentence, but containing everything Michael had always longed to be. Neverland, once his paradise, became an abandoned place. The ride stopped. The gates rusted. For years, the place was neglected like a ghost of a dream that had collapsed under the weight of notoriety. It stood there as a cold reminder what fame had stolen: freedom, privacy, and the childhood he never had. But Michael's true legacy cannot be measured by scandals, charts, or even global influence. It lies in the emotional imprint he left behind. His voice, aching, powerful, unmistakable, still shapes the music of generations to follow. His dance, sharp, precise, gravity-defying, remains iconic. His philanthropic work, often overshadowed by controversy, was one of the largest contributions an artist has ever made. He inspired artists across all genres. He broke racial barriers on MTV. He redefined music videos. He turned concerts into cinematic experiences. He made the impossible seem natural. But perhaps the most profound part of his legacy is this: Michael Jackson reminded the world that greatness is often forged from pain, and the brightest light often casts the longest shadow. He was a man made of trauma, swallowed by expectation, yet loved by billions. A person who gave everything, until there was nothing left to give. And long after the newspapers forget, after the scandals turn to dust, his music remains, eternal, echoing, untouchable. When the world mentions Michael Jackson, people remember the initial brilliance, the moonwalk, the sequin glove, the voice that could be both soaring and trembling in the same breath. But behind every legend is always a very human story, written not in headlines, but in wounds, hope, and fragile truths that only time reveals. Michael's life was a paradox, a person who brought joy to billions, but struggled to find joy for himself. A global icon, yet utterly lonely. A perfectionist who created masterpieces, but spent a lifetime healing the broken pieces inside. He was never allowed to be normal, not as a child, not as an adult, and not even after leaving this world. Every part of his life was swallowed by expectation. Had to perform, had to shine, had to endure, had to forgive, had to overcome everything that always tried to pull him down. But perhaps Michael's story leaves a quiet truth, that behind the world's greatest artists are humans made of pain, longing, and a journey to find belonging. His battles were huge, but his heart was just as big. The sensitivity that made him vulnerable was exactly what made him extraordinary. In the end, Michael Jackson's legacy lies not just in the records or stages he conquered, but in the emotional mark he left. A reminder that art born from suffering can still light up the world. His music remains. His influence remains. And somewhere between the brilliance and the brokenness,
for a man of his age, he was in
the
good
human
shape.
behind the legend finally found peace.